meeting of the Marshall City Council to order with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome everyone here this evening. We have an agenda before us. On agenda item number 2, are there any changes to that agenda? We'll move on to agenda item number 3. Consider the minutes of our last regular council meeting that was held on April 24th. The council does have those minutes in their packet. Are there any corrections?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Jim to approve the minutes as they have been presented. We'll move to a vote.
Trying to restart a.
Not that one.
Okay, motion passes. Agenda item number 4 is a consent agenda. So the items on the consent agenda would be to consider the application for exempt permit for Lyon County Agricultural Society for August 10, 2018, calling for a public hearing on a new on-sale intoxicating liquor license for AJ's Family Arcade, Inc. Consider the request for street closure for Reinhardt Food Service for a company truck rodeo event on June 9th, call for public hearing and introduction of the planned unit development agreement regarding unique addition plat, and then finally consider the approval of the bills and the project payment. So I'll ask if there's any item that anyone on the council or staff would like removed for purposes of a separate discussion. I think, Dennis, you have one.
Yes, Mayor and Council. Ask that number 8, the planned unit development introduction, be removed from consent agenda.
So 8.
Yes.
And
Number 7.
any other item? If not, Kyle, I'll let you have a second to move those. So remaining on the consent agenda item would be 5, 6, and 7.
No.
Excuse
5,
me.
6, and 9.
The new 5, 6, and 7. So,
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
motion by John.
Second.
Seconded by Steve. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. We'll now move to agenda item number 8. Agenda item number 8, which was agenda item number 7, the request for a street closure from Reinhardt Food Service for a company truck rodeo event. Craig, you have a question?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I discussed this earlier last week with Public Safety Director, Mr. Yant, and had requested that he encourage Reinhardt to utilize the driving track and skills pad at the Merit Center. We actually talked about this a year ago and under that same direction, so I was, to say the least, a little bit disappointed that we had to revisit it again. He did take the Reinhardt staff out, did a tour. I think that they're interested in it, so they may not actually execute this agreement. Hopefully they don't need to, but there's a couple of logistical things that they're trying to work out. But I think that, I'm certainly not opposed to them doing this. I think it's always problematic when we close streets off like that, especially that one's kind of a crossing connector along the railroad. So it always makes me a little bit nervous. They're a great business partner, community partner. So I think, obviously we want to do everything we can do to work with them. But again, I think that it's important for us to encourage them to try to use that track and facility that we have available. I think they're excited about doing that. But in case they can't work out a couple logistical things for their equipment, this may need to go forward. But I just wanted to bring that out as a point of order for future.
Well, thank you, Craig, and thank you for having that conversation and bringing that to the public safety's attention.
If they do use the track out at the Merit Center, then they pay a fee for the use
Yeah,
of it?
there's a rental fee for it. And we only charge them basic cost for street closure. So I just think, and even in the city's interest, monetarily, we're ahead putting it out at the track.
I was going to bring out that same thing for that exact same reason. I thought we had discussed this last year, and with the Merit Center, there's really no reason to shut a public street for private training for trucks when you have the Merit Center, because why shut a public road when there's a much safer place to do it?
My understanding is the logistical issue is not with the trucks. It's actually because they also use their forklift equipment and just the movement of the equipment. But we've discussed a couple of options that they could take the forklifts off the back of their semi-trailers with another business in town and put them on the ground, and then when they're done, they could put them back in their trailers, take them back to their yard. So we're trying to work with them on it.
Okay, so with that, Craig, do you want to make a motion?
I move we approve the request from Reinhardt's for the closure of Fairview for their annual rodeo.
Motion by Craig, seconded by John. Discussion?
Actually, I'm sorry, it's to call for a public hearing. I apologize.
Maybe those logistics will be worked out.
Okay, so again, motion to call for the public hearing by Craig, seconded by John. Discussion on that motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 9. Agenda item number 9 is the introduction of the Plan Unit Development Agreement regarding the unique addition plat. Dennis, I believe you had a reason to have this as a separate vote.
Yes, Your Honor. After putting this matter on the consent agenda, I did have a lengthy discussion with Councilmember Lozinski as to either a current or a future perception of a conflict of interest. If in fact this is approved, there may be opportunities for bidding for the construction of some of the facilities. So Mr. Lozinski has made the decision not to participate in any discussion or any votes related to this development proposal. So he wanted it pulled off so that he could abstain from any voting, to make sure that everybody on the council understood that reasoning for.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Are there any other questions? This is simply introduction tonight.
I have a conference I'm going to in Utah next week. I'm not sure if I'll be back for the next council meeting or not when we take further action on this. I do have concerns. This planned unit development agreement is with Unique Opportunities Marshall, which to the best of my knowledge is an entity that doesn't exist at the present time. And this plan basically is suited to their needs to build an apartment complex. If in fact, and it's my understanding that they would like TIF financing, tax increment financing, and if that doesn't come about, if the city doesn't approve that, and they don't build, I don't know if they'll build or not. If they don't, then is this a planned unit of development that some other builder would want? And are we putting together a plan here that may not be best suited for somebody else to come in and build apartments or houses or some other structure in that area? So I do have some concerns about this.
Other questions about the introduction? Not, is there a motion to introduce?
I so move.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. We'll note the abstention. Agenda item number 10. Agenda item number 10 is the review of the services contract for North Ambulance Service Operations. With us tonight is Dan DeSmet, representing North Ambulance. And when the city made this move, it was roughly 20 years ago.
Yeah, 1997 was the official start date, so I've been here with you over 20 years here already. So I was just getting started in EMS at that time, so quite a while ago. So, you know, I think it's been just a fun time here. I think we've hopefully served the city very, very well, and want to continue to do that. So I come before you tonight for request to continue with that contract. As Mayor Burns just mentioned here, we have been with the city. We do a lot with the city, and I wanted to take an opportunity to do a couple things. I want to introduce our new supervisor here for the region, Louis Lawaji. Louis is from the area here, moved over to Redwood Falls here probably about almost 20 years ago, actually, yeah. And has been over there, worked for us for a paramedic over there, and has gotten the regional supervisor position. So he's going to be seen over in this part of the world a little bit more, and he'll be around. Some of you probably know him from some interactions as well. The second part is I wanted to just take a few minutes, show you some of the things that we've been doing over the past year here, some of where our calls are, some of the age ranges, some of those type of things that we do here. And with that, Sharon, if you don't mind. So as some of you know, we had been in one of the city buildings, offices there right next to our current base there, right next to the fire hall. Had been up there since, probably about 4 or 5 years ago. At that time, we had outgrown that particular garage and went with a new lease agreement here and built a new building here right next to the fire hall and that old base. Currently, one of our trucks was on a transfer when the picture was taken, but currently have 4 trucks here in Marshall, 1 up in Minneota, and then we have 4 additional trucks over in Redwood Falls here too. So 9 trucks in the area here, so kind of serving the community that way. We do 2 24-hour shift coverage trucks, so we always have 2 trucks on all the time here. Working on 3rd truck here for the weekend call hours and stuff. We're getting quite a bit busier. 2006, our volume was 1,838, and that was just simply transports. That does include the fire calls, some of the cancels, calls to accidents where we may have went to the accident and didn't transport, anything like that. So we're closer to that 2,000 mark with all those type of calls and stuff as well. So continue to grow here. Didn't have a lot of growth in 2007, but we're well on to about 1875 projection here for this year if we continue where we are at with calls right now. So that's kind of where we're at. Our average response time, I know you guys are always interested in this and kind of ask, 2.19 minutes. That means that includes the times where we're at the base from that 8 a.m. until 10 p.m. time frame, and that also includes our time where we're off base, away from the premise and stuff as well. So it kind of averages out. That's why a little bit longer, but most of the time our response is right there at the base, or I mean immediate. So a little deceptive there with that 2.9, even though that's an extremely good time there as well. So there's our PSA. As you can see, we kind of run all the way from Ghent and the western side of Lyon County, all the way across, and down along by Russell there. Russell is actually covered by Balaton's PSA primary service area. And then we go all the way across over by Tracy there and back up along over to the city of Vesta, and then kind of back across there. So pretty large area, about 40 miles from east to west there. So, and then we do a lot of intercepts, obviously, with Balaton, Cottonwood, Lamberton over in the Redwood Falls area. It depends if they're coming this way or going towards Redwood, some of those type of places. Wabassos also uses us a lot as well. So that is our area, pretty large. Number of calls per day, per hour of the day there. You can see we have a couple spikes. You can see kind of right around that noon hour, we have a little bit of a spike. And then if you look at that lunchtime, that 1700, that's 5 o'clock, 5 to 6, 6 to 7 right there. We also have a little bit of a spike, which is pretty normal. A lot of people out and about, people coming home, things like that. One thing we are noticing here over the last probably year and a half is a few more calls, and you can see that here a little bit. You kind of start to spike about 7 o'clock. We're noticing that a little bit more even earlier in the mornings now, and we're not quite sure what that is. It seems like a lot of those calls are coming from our assisted living and stuff, so I think that's kind of where some of that is coming from as well. And then age distribution there. you can see it's kind of interesting. We just did this particular graph over in Redwood Falls as well here. We kind of looked at that. This is pretty well dispersed over all the age ranges. We're over in Redwood Falls. It was quite a bit significantly towards the older age range, that 60 to 75 to 80 range there, and even older. So this is pretty well dispersed over a lot of age ranges here for our community in this particular part of the county. So. And then call types. Right here, we're about 1,000 of our calls are about our 911. Transfers are about 500 to 600 in that range. And we could continue to stay pretty steady with that as well. Most of our transfers are down to Sioux Falls, and there's a slide here coming up, but most of those go to Sioux Falls, some to St. Cloud and stuff as well here. So, but 911s are primarily where we do most of our business, same with our transfers as well.
So the airport.
What's that?
There was a bar for the airport.
Oh, yep. Airport, what that is transports that like fixed wing transports, and that is when, like, if weather's bad or they can't get a helicopter in or something, that's a transport out to the airport there. So I don't have the exact numbers, probably about 20 to 30 a year for those type of calls as well.
And this doesn't include helicopter?
Nope, that does not include helicopters.
Dan, my medical hat's going to go on.
Sure.
Why do we have any DOA calls? They don't need an ambulance.
That's a good question. A lot of times law enforcement goes, or maybe it's out in the county somewhere where law enforcement isn't there right away. So we do go to those DOA calls. We'll call them in the field then instead of working those and bringing them into the hospital there as well. So, yeah, that's...
The fire department still run their first responders too, or you go, so they can't call them, so you'd have to go out there and call them for them too, right?
Yep, that's correct. So any of our surrounding agencies
Sure.
as well.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep. And then 911 transportation destinations. 99.9% of our calls, whether it's 911s or whatever, go back to Avera Marshall here. We do have a very small percentage that go over to Redwood Falls, and a lot of those calls are the ones that are over on our east side, that might be over by Vesta, might be over in that Basso area sometimes where it's right on the border. So a few do go over there, just a handful. As you can see, it's a very, very small percentage that goes over that way. So. And then again, we talked about transport destinations. Avera McKinnon, Sanford down Sioux Falls, Avera Heart Hospital, Avera Behavioral Health. We do quite a few behavioral healths. I think I had spoken with the council quite a few, probably about 7 years ago. We had entered in a contract with Avera here to do some of their behavioral health stuff. Took some of that away from the sheriff's department, so they weren't as busy with that. And so we continue to do that. And then kind of a smattering of other hospitals along the way there as well. Any questions?
Questions for Dan?
Perfect. So with that, I think Mr. Simpson had maybe just a small comment, but I would ask that you go ahead and approve that contract pending some maybe wording changes, and I'll let you speak to that.
David has a question.
Oh, sorry, Dave.
Question, Dan, just occurring to me, the activity you're describing, are you able to meet it under same staffing levels as previous years?
No, we continue to grow our staffing. We, like I had just mentioned, with the weekends now here and stuff, we're also adding a third truck as well, and we'll be looking
Okay, well, trucks are one thing, but I'm talking about people and hours.
Right.
Is there a one-to-one relationship there?
Yeah, so I think when we're talking trucks and people, we're talking the same thing but different
Okay.
wording.
All right.
So when I say adding trucks, that means staffing as well that goes with those trucks.
Okay.
So there's 2 staff that go with each truck, so we're adding staffing as well. So those are people that are coming into the community as well. A lot of those folks we get, I think, as you know, from out the college. A lot of our college students come and help us out for 4 or 5 years while they're going to college here. We get some of the students that are going to like nursing schools, things like that, that want to do their EMT, maybe want to work in like an ED and stuff, and then they work with us as well. So it's not that it's easy, but with a bigger community here, it does help us to hire some of those staff.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you for your leadership. You know, one of the things that, you know, a quality community has quality health care and emergency services. And your North is certainly part of that, so
Thank you very much. And thank you to the council. You've always been very supportive for us, and same with the community of Marshall. So thank you very much to you folks as well.
Dennis, you have a...
Yes, I do. The contract, I think, needs a little more clarification. I think I should be able to look at the contract and understand the relationship between the City of Marshall as license holder, delegating that authority. And it's not clear to me in here. People who work with that every day, they understand it. I'm looking at it and I'm saying, why are we involved? What's the relation, the contractual relationship? So I just want a few, and I will be making a few editorial changes and send it off to the ambulance and the city for signature.
So if this is approved tonight, which, you know, and maybe, Dan, you want to explain the delegation of the license. We went through this, you know, when we first made the change 21 years ago. But.
Sure. And I think that's a great point that Mr. Simpson does bring up. So currently the city holds the license with the Minnesota Emergency Regulatory Board here. And those are that PSA I spoke about. Every community or every ambulance service has that primary service area. And they can either operate it themselves or they can hire someone to operate it for them. In this particular case, and I say hire, but we are contracted to provide services here for the City of Marshall and have been doing that, like I said, for 20 years. The city continues to hold that license, so if there's something that comes up that maybe we're doing a horrible job or something like that, that the city says, hey, maybe there's someone else better out there or something, then they can look at that as well. But the PSA and the license is held here, and so I think that's what Mr. Simpson's kind of inquiring, if we could get a better understanding of that.
And I just, you know, in here it talks about the contract goes away if there are material deficiencies, but nobody defines that term anywhere. And as I read the statute, the ambulance authority has to be approved every 2 years. They have a 2-year license, and if they're doing their job, it'll be renewed for another 2-year period of time. And I want that in there. Obviously, one of the material deficiencies is if they lose their license for the state of Minnesota, then this contract is terminated. So it's more legalese stuff that I just want a little clarification, but not substantive changes. We all agree, great service, and it's better for them to do it than the City of Marshall to start all over with our own ambulance service. So I would recommend approval subject to a legal review.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that.
Motion by Jim, seconded by Steve. Discussion?
I have a few questions here. First of all, did you say that the City of Marshall has the license, but you have a license, or both of you have licenses?
No, the city holds a license as the stakeholder, PSA, primary service holder of it. There's no cost. We pay the cost of that and stuff as part of the contractual services for that as well. So, but the city continues to hold that license.
I think the other reference you had, though, was that you're probably getting at is that your North is certified as a level whatever the provider by Department of Health.
Right. So we're an ALS provider. We're an advanced life support provider here, and that's the service that we provide here to the city.
I was looking at the old contract, and that was written back in 2011, and there was a paragraph there about the license, and it said, upon termination of this agreement, Memorial shall provide the City of Marshall with consent or other documents necessary to the Emergency Services Regulatory Board to transfer the ambulance license back to the City of Marshall. But there never was a transfer to?
There was never a transfer. There's one page that was kept with the city, so it was never transferred to North Memorial.
Okay. In the old agreement, there also was a paragraph dealing with an ambulance advisory committee, and the committee would consist of representatives from North Memorial, the City of Marshall, appropriate healthcare entities, and other interested persons from the area. And it indicated it may be established to advise North Memorial in providing the best possible service for the area. Now, that paragraph was removed. Was it removed because there never was an advisory committee? There's no need for the advisory committee, or?
And that's correct. There was never an advisory committee. Initially, I think Mayor Burns could maybe talk to that, but I don't think it was together for a short time. I think it remained in that language, but has never been that. I've been here with the service, and that's been 13 years.
That was during that transition
period.
time.
Right. I can share with you that we go to all the emergency management meetings, fire meetings, attend all the Mayor Commission meetings, attend like Avera's bi-monthly advisory meetings up there. So we get a good sense and have an opportunity to work with all of our entities here in the city and very engaged with all of those folks.
Another paragraph had to do with financial, and it indicated that North Memorial agrees to provide a detailed financial statement regarding the Marshall ambulance service to the city of Marshall on a semi-annual basis. And that paragraph was removed. Did we ever receive those detailed financial statements?
Yeah, and that was removed when we left the current city building there and stuff as well. So,
another thing I would have a concern about is under the old agreement, it indicated that the contract would continue to have an automatic renewal for an additional 12-month period. Mm-hmm. So every 12 months, unless you did anything else, unless you did something, it would automatically renew. And in this contract, it talks about a 5-year renewal period. And could you explain the reason for the change?
Yeah, we just simply wanted to continue on that 5-year period. We built the building. We've had stability here with you folks for over 20 years and felt that would be best. We'd certainly always be happy to come in and do a report here to the city, and if there's ever any problems, be able to do that, but just easier for that renewal to continue. I think there's that out as well.
And we are continuing on that annual renewal because that 5-year contract terminated in 16, so 17 and 18 we're continuing on that.
Right.
So on the other one, so it was an every year renewal automatic, and here it's a 5-year.
That's the proposal.
Is that what we wanted to is move to a 5-year, additional 5 years at a time?
I certainly would, and our management would like to do that from the Twin Cities perspective.
What do other cities have in their contracts?
Redwood just renewed theirs, and they did a 5-year renewal as well. Most places are doing that as long as everything's moving smoothly.
You've been in the community for 20 years already,
That's
correct?
correct.
I'd be comfortable, they've been here, they're established building, I'd be comfortable with a 5-year renewal. Because there is still a 360-day out that.
Yep, that's correct.
There's an out on the other side. I'm okay.
Yep.
Is that a motion?
I already made a motion.
There's a motion
It's
on the
already been
table.
seconded.
Yep. Any other discussion on the motion?
One more. Under the 2011 contract, it had insurance provision of $1 million and $3 million. And those are the same dollar amounts in the current contract and will be for the next 5 years, evidently. Is there a reason, with medical liability going fairly high, is there a reason to change those $1 million and $3 million insurance amounts?
That's one of our discussions that we were going to have with Mr. Simpson as well.
I just wanted to clarify, $1 million, is that a general liability and $3 million in excess?
Yeah.
I guess I'm still comfortable with those limits based upon the history.
Yes, and that's our management also is up there.
And are those insurance limit amounts, are they comparable to other cities?
They are. And those are the same limits that we did just put in place here with Redwood Falls as well.
In the Twin Cities, you have agreements with cities in the...
I truly can't speak intelligently to that because I'm not familiar with the Twin Cities contract.
I'd be curious if they have the same $1 and $3 million limits.
Okay.
Any other discussion on the motion?
1 million and 3 million are pretty standard across medical entities, so that's what we have to have. So,
thank you, Dr. Meister.
Any other discussion? If not, we have a motion on the table. We'll move to a vote. All those in favor of signify by saying aye.
aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Agenda item number 11. Agenda item number 11 is presentation of the Marshall-Lyon County Library Annual Report. With us tonight is Michelle, our Marshall-Lyon County Library Director. Craig, I'll call on you as our liaison member to the Library Board to introduce Michelle and this agenda item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ladies and gentlemen in the audience and council, Michelle Einiger, our very capable, competent, and effective director of the Marshall-Lyon County Library with our annual report. Michelle?
I could probably start talking before you get to see the PowerPoint. Thank you this evening for allowing me to have a few minutes of your time and presenting our 2017 annual report. As you know, I started in 2016, and one of the things that we did that first year was to really I tried to understand the community, but also the library, how it operated, what we had in the collection, and things like that. So when we started in 2017, we decided that we wanted to kind of push the limits of our collection. So we did a few things. Do you want to go to the second slide? We wanted to tell a story about how our collection is used and who uses it, and that's what you have before you tonight. So one of the things we did early on was we all talked about observing people using our library. How do they use the space? There are some people who check out and leave immediately. There are people who hang out, who may or may not use the collection, but they use it there. And then there's people who hang out for a long period of time, and then they also take the collection home with them. So after we did some observations and we looked at some data, we started asking some general and some specific questions to elicit feedback. And from that, we were able to then make some changes and decide on a few strategic responses. So we, of course, as a library, want to be responsive to everybody. Next slide. So before you have on the first side some of our data that tells that story. So I wanted to tell briefly a few stories behind some of the data you're seeing. So unlike a lot of other libraries I've worked at, we have an incredibly strong under the age of 18 circulation. It's almost half of what we circulate. So right there it tells us we have a lot of families in there. And when you look even further at, when you look below where it says most heavily used, you'll see that all of the different smaller collections that we have in the children's area, kids from the ages of 0 and 6 make up half of that. So 24% of our circulation is really coming from kids who are 0 to 6, which means we're definitely in the early literacy business. That's really important to us. Another trend that we are completely bucking in that is going a different direction nationally is a lot of libraries are seeing a sharp increase of their digital library, but they're seeing a decrease in their physical library. We're not. We're seeing actually an increase in both. And so that's also really unusual, which also suggests that we are gaining more customers and probably gaining back some of the customers who are unhappy with the way things went a few years ago. We also have an impressive hold number. You'll see that right under the circulation, and it is very impressive. So more than 18,000 of those circulating items came from someplace else. But when you look at it overall and do the math, it's actually just a little over 10%, which also tells the story that we have a lot of people who browse, which means if you've ever been in the library, we have a very large collection, and it can be overwhelming to just say, okay, I'm trying to find the needle in the haystack. And so part of what we want to try to do is to help our browsers. And last but certainly not least, at the bottom of the front of your bookmark, you'll see that we have an incredibly generous population, but they also read a lot of diverse things. We don't just get bestsellers donated to us. And we look at all those things, and it's really adding to the richness of the collection. So certainly we spend money from you and from the county. We also have donations of money where the Friends or the Foundation or other people want us to buy things for the collection. But we also put in a lot of physical items that people donate to us. And you can see over $21,000 in materials were added to the collection. So just briefly, some of our strategic responses that we did in 2017 and how we're going to carry that out in 2018. And I just said we realized we had a lot of browsers, so we definitely want to try to help browsers. So one of the things that we've done is we've invited more authors. We've been very lucky to have a number of authors come. Not only authors come talk, but also we've had some groups do some readings. So some of that is Readers Theater. But the picture that you see there, we actually, for Banned Books Week, we had readings from banned books. And we had about 35, 40 people in the audience. PBS from the Twin Cities actually came and taped part of it. The other thing that we've done is we've added a homebound service, so people who can't get to the library, we're using volunteers, and so we're able to provide reading materials to people not only in Marshall, but also out in the community or out and into the county. And one of the ways we've done that is also a county-wide large print rotation. We started that at the end of last year and are continuing that. And so the 5 buildings, 3 of which are Marshall, Lyon County, also Cottonwood and Ballatin, and then Tracy and Minneota, who have independent libraries. We each put in 50 large print books, and now every 3 months we rotate those around, and we're getting quite a bit of circulation. And anecdotally, people are really happy to have those new to them, is how they like to say it. And then last but not least, we've created some smaller collections, because if we can pull things out like DIY University are really popular reading materials on academic topics. We have a number of people who are interested in that kind of thing, but they're all over the Dewey collection. This way we put them together and it's a lot easier for them to browse. So that's what we've done with those 3 things. 2018, we're continuing to reconfigure the collections, but it's a lot more physical and a lot bigger. One of the things that we heard in feedback is people are busy. So if they can't get in, get what they want, and get out in 5 minutes or less, we may be taken off their errand list, and that makes us sad. So what we've done, the 3 areas, other than the kids area, the 3 areas that they're always looking at are audiobooks, DVDs, and new. So we're moving the media up front next to the new books, and that will hopefully help them get in and out a lot faster. We also seen a sharp increase in fiction, so we're adding to the fiction shelving. And then also to make it easier to browse, we are taking the fiction collection and dividing it up into a couple of smaller collections, like mystery, westerns. We're pulling those out, so again, it's a smaller collection for people to browse. Last but not least, back with what we're doing in the county is in 2018, we're looking at doing pop-up libraries, and that's where we are going for the first Saturday in the farmers markets this summer, and we will take computers. Because we have a hotspot, we can get cards to people right then. We could even take materials, check them out, and we're going to be pushing our digital libraries in some of the smaller communities around the county. The other big area, obviously, from the circulation is we want to focus on families and learning. And of course, the big buzzword right now is STEM. And again, from feedback, we heard from parents 2 things. First of all, they're busy. They want to get in and get out. But the second is STEM makes them a little nervous. You know, they're like, well, I didn't do well in math and science. How do I help my kid do well in those kinds of things? So we had some conversations around that. And one of the things is we've increased our made more robust, I should say, because they were there before, our programming on Saturdays, so families can come. Science Saturday and Legos in particular are all about STEM. And then the story time we do once a month on a Saturday is called Family Story Time, so we encourage all ages and family members to come. The other, we got a Marshall Foundation grant to do the World of Wonder backpacks. Those are also on science topics. You see 3 different colors of backpacks. That's because they're different age groups. And there's 5 books plus an activity sheet plus a field guide. So when the kids read and do their activity, they can write their scientific results in the notebook or draw a picture or whatever that might be. So we want to continue that. That seems to be popular. We've applied for a grant to build some daycare kits. There will be also some STEM things in there, but that's also to help the daycares make sure they're following the 5 principles of early literacy, which are listed there. So we model that in every story time we do. When we go out there, they see us do that, but we want to make sure that they have the tools to do that as well. And last but not least, we're building a STEM play area toward the back, and all our STEAM actually, because we'll have a little puppet stage, so that's the arts of it. And that's really to help kids do directed play, to help them figure things out, because logical thinking, even at 2 or 3 years of age, is important in building those skills for later. Writers are another group that we have targeted. So as you can see, we've done some programs. The Salon program is a writing program. NaNoWriMo is actually National Novel Writing Month in November, but there's 2 other months out of the year where people try to write a novel. So we have done some programming around that to support that. And we've also focused on that area of the collection, so we have more books in that area. We already started in 2018, and we have teamed up with MAFAC, Read Local Committee, and we had a How to Get Published panel a couple of Saturdays ago, and we again had almost 30 people there. So we thought this was a good group to help. The one at the bottom is really interesting. The state of Minnesota has committed to this project for the next couple of years, and they are paying for it mainly through the regional library systems. But Min Writes, Min Reads in the Create area, people who write can upload their material into, it's basically a WordPress site, but it will format it for them so it looks like a book, and then they can export it as an EPUB, which is what they need to do to sell it online, or as a PDF. In the share, then they can upload it onto a platform that it's called Selfie, but Minnesota has called it Indie Minnesota, which means that anybody in the state of Minnesota, if you share your book on that platform, anybody in Minnesota can read it. Also, Selfie is partially funded by Library Journal, which is a professional journal, so librarians also review that. So if your book is good enough in there, you might get reviewed in a national publication. And if you are, all libraries who have access to Selfie across the United States, if you're picked as one of those top books, it'll actually, anybody across the United States will be able to see it. And so just really quickly, the goals and grants that we've been doing. 2 that are 2-year grants that we're working on right now. Archive It. Archive.org. If you haven't been there, it's fun to look at. It is back in 1995, I believe. They thought that, you know, because this is such a, the internet is so nebulous, how are researchers or historians going to look back, because we don't have paper anymore. And so they've been out there archiving it, but of course because of the exponential explosion out there, they stopped about 10 years ago doing local archiving. And so now they're running a pilot to get local libraries to actually archive locally, and we're participating with 30 libraries across the country. There's only one library smaller than us in Arizona, and then we're the second smallest out of the 30 who are participating. Libraries Without Borders is actually an international organization. When many of the Syrian refugees went to France, they were there right away and set up tent libraries and accessed information for them. So that's the kind of work that they've done in the past. What they have done more currently in the United States is in the Bronx, Detroit, and Washington, D.C. They've created what they call the Laundromat Library Program, where they provide access to controlled information that helps whatever group uses that laundromat to help them get information. So we're, again, one of 9 libraries. The 2 rural libraries, we're one. The other rural library is Brainerd, so we're, again, the smallest, participating in the grant. But what I got to talk with them on the phone last week, and they realized that rural laundromats operate differently than suburban or urban ones. So we're going to be the one that gets to go off on a different tangent and try something really different to see what kind of access. So I don't yet know what we're going to be doing, but that's kind of exciting for us. And then I already talked about the daycare kits. The last one I'll just mention briefly, we're looking for grants, and actually Libraries Without Borders is interested in helping us find that grant. But we're looking at making a digital makerspace, which means that we would have higher-end computers and software to help people who would do editing, whether it's audio, visual, music, they wanted to make a movie. We would have that kind of editing equipment. We would also have preservation equipment. So all of you who have kids and grandkids and you went to all their concerts and taped them on VHS, I'm here to tell you right now that's a really unstable way to save it. So we would have, for example, technology technology that would help you get it digital, so if something happens to the tape, you still have access to it. And our focus here initially, we want to work with collecting immigrant and refugee stories, whether you came last year or you have a fifth generation story that's been handed down about your immigrant ancestors. We want to collect those stories because it really is the social and cultural history of Marshall and Lyon County, and I think it will also help reflect the changes that we see in the community by collecting those kinds of stories. So we hope to find a grant for that. So thank you for your continued support. I said we once in a while do different kinds of story times. So once in the summer, every summer, we invite the kids to bring their favorite stuffed animal, and we have what we call the sleepover story time. They come in their pajamas, we read a story, they leave their animals there, and they go home, and then after we close the building, we put them in different, these are some of the nice ones. We have one where somebody's on the photocopier photocopying their face. So, you know, fun things that they do after their young parents go home. So then we take pictures and then we share those with them when they come back and pick up their stuffed animals. So, any questions?
Thank you, Michelle. Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks, Michelle.
Agenda item number 12. Agenda item number 12 is a discussion of the Parkway 2 covenants. So with us tonight to present is Tara Onken.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Just wanted to discuss a little bit about the Parkway 2 covenants. I know we've been discussing with our EDA, and the reason that this came about is because we are looking in the next couple of weeks or months to just sell some of the lots out there. But before we did that, one of the things that the EDA had discussed was to amend or update some of the covenants that govern the land out there. And there are a couple of primary reasons why. Right now, before the EDA sells any more lots, we are the majority owner, which makes the covenant change far more simple of a process. And the other thing to take note as we're discussing this is that the city does not enforce covenants. It's actually the people that are governed by the covenants. It's a self-enforced item. So it's your neighbors that really would read or look at the covenants. So just with that in mind, there was a couple of reasons why we felt that it was important to look at this now versus years down the road. One of them was to simplify and shorten the document. The original document was around 7 or 8 pages long, and what our proposed here, and it's signed but it's not recorded, so but it's 3 pages long. So it's a lot more simple for homeowners out in that Parkway 2 edition to read, sift through, and understand. A couple things that we wanted to do also was to delete any of the repetitive items and then delete some of the covenants that were in there that were already enforceable by city code or city ordinance. So it really was deleting a lot of redundancies that we didn't need in there, just to make it more simple again for those residents. We did make a few minor changes to some of the numbers, if you will, regarding square footages or like utility shed sizes. We wanted to loosen up some of the restrictions, but we still wanted to maintain the integrity of the covenants and what people built out there in the first place. So what we did, we discussed it at EDA, a couple of the things that we wanted to do. We held a public hearing where I would say about half of the residents either attended or I got a couple phone calls, hey, I can't make it, but talk me through it. And everybody, I think John can attest, I think David was there for a little bit. Jim was there for a little bit. We had really good feedback. Steve, you were there too. We had really good feedback, a lot of questions, and it's actually kind of surprising, but a lot of the homeowners that came that were notified didn't even know they had covenants. So a lot of the questions were, well, is this going to change zoning or this and that? And so we explained to them, no, these are the changes, and everybody was, really thankful to learn that they have covenants and really what they mean, but also know that the changes were being made with them in mind and with their input incorporated. This is how we arrived to this document today. So I'm not sure if anybody has any questions or comments in that regard.
Thank you, Tara. Comments from the EDA first.
The meeting that Tara was talking about surprisingly was well attended because it was a blizzard. I mean, you're trudging through about 8 inches of snow, and I figured I'd go in there and be sitting with Cal and Tara and drinking coffee, and nobody'd come. That place was really quite packed, and people were coming and going the whole time. So it was, I think a lot of the homeowners that were affected by this actually came out. So it was good to see. So
Very good.
they were all positive. Nobody had anything negative or was mad about it. It was a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Any other discussion, input, questions?
I know I visited with Tara earlier today about this, and it's just wording in item 10. I know I didn't bring this to the meeting, but I read through it now. The use of the word neutral color is so vague.
On item 11.
Item 11, thank you.
Yep.
And Tara and I chatted about this. What is a neutral color? I mean, it's wording I would take out so you don't have neighbors bickering with neighbors.
Probably not the color of your shirt.
Junior, but you gotta remember, Junior. You know, you say that, Craig. Junior Cack's house was the color of my shirt, and it looked very nice.
I think your shirt looks great.
I think it's wonderful.
I would not complain about your shirt.
But anyway, the point I'm making is red a neutral color, is blue, because those are colors now that are being used very commonly. And they're out there now, and that's just, I had read that one, and
I think the intent of that was like no neon, whatever colors, but I would certainly feel comfortable striking that. I mean,
I just think let's keep neighbors from trying to argue with each other, then it saves Jason time.
Thank you.
And then the other one I read, and this is just me doing my thought in my mind, is that satellite dishes are not allowed 10 feet from the common lot line. I don't think it'll ever become a problem, but you can set a house 5 feet from a lot line. So technically, you could have a satellite dish 10 feet off the lot line.
The house has got bigger setback than 5.
5
Isn't
feet.
it 5 feet side setback?
5 feet on each yard. Yep.
So you could technically have a satellite dish on your roof within 10 feet of the lot line.
Good call.
Maybe we add it.
I'm just, you
we
know,
can make that change.
I
Yeah,
would
that's
just make
why.
it so it matches the code of what the house has to set back.
Yep. I'm good with that.
I just read those two minor, just to keep, just,
Consistency.
yes.
Makes sense.
Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor, question for the attorney. You reviewed the process on this, and it doesn't need city council approval?
The EDA is a separately appointed board with their own statutory and but ordinance rights to do this. And out of a courtesy, I think bringing it here is fine.
Yeah. These are just suggestions.
And it's
Absolutely.
And I
good.
chatted with her earlier. So.
Yep.
Good information sharing, so thank you, Tara.
Yeah. Thank you
Any
very
other
much.
questions?
Since they've already signed it, are they going to be?
We did
making
not
changes?
record these, so we can certainly make changes.
So you're okay. So
Yep.
Okay, with that, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Move then to agenda item number 13, consider the approval of the City of Marshall Comprehensive Plan Amendment. Jason Anderson, our Assistant City Engineer, I'll let you start with this.
Yep. Thank you, Mayor. For background, the current City of Marshall Comprehensive Plan was created in 1994 and then amended in 2004. The 94 plan showed lots 9 and 10 of Legion Field's second edition, which is the area with the wording on the map there. Showed that as an industrial use, and the 2004 amendment changed that use to low-density residential, which then later resulted in the zoning of that land to low-density residential in 2006. This comp plan amendment being proposed here is part of the process to prepare the land for future development, as the southern approximately 9 acres of this land is proposed to be developed with several apartment buildings as a planned unit development. Staff has reviewed the development and zoning in the area and made recommendation to the Planning Commission that the comp plan be amended to allow for high-density residential development on this land with adjacent industrial use and single-family use across the road. It's our view that the high-density residential is a proper transition between the two land uses. At the April 25th Planning Commission meeting, a public hearing was held, and the Planning Commission recommended approval of the comp plan amendment to the City Council. So therefore, the recommendation to the Council tonight is to approve the comp plan amendment as shown in that figure up there on the board per the Planning Commission recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Question for Jason?
I move approval of the comprehensive plan amendment as shown.
I'll second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by John. Discussion?
So I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. So basically, we're just changing the zoning from low density to higher density.
It's not a zoning change, it's a comp plan amendment. It's a change in the comp plan to reflect the intent of the city to develop this land in that nature as high-density residential. It's not an actual rezone.
Any other discussion on the motion?
So Jason, clarification, if we do this and we change the comp plan and I want to go in and build a house on that side, and I just want to build a house, could I? Even though it would be, the comp plan says that we're going to.
I don't think there's anything that says that you couldn't. It would just be counter to what the comp plan is stating, that that's the desire of the council and the planning commission. So the desire is to have high density there based on what the comp plan is saying.
Yeah, but you can always go with
the actual density. Zoning of the land today is R1 low density single family residential. So that would be, that's still the driving factor there until it's rezoned with either a PUD or a different zoning at a later date. So this is just a comp plan amendment to kind of reflect the intent of the commission and council.
So the PUD.
Can I ask Jason, why, maybe I'm missing something here, why wouldn't we do a straight rezone?
The rezone would come later with the PUD plan, because the PUD plan is a rezone.
Thank you.
The comp plan would need to, amendment needs to come first.
Correct.
Craig, did you have a question?
That was my same question. Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 14. Agenda item number 14 is the Michigan Road, Superior Road Reconstruction Project. The action before us would be to consider the resolution of approving the plans and specifications in order in the advertisement for the bids. Jason, anything to add?
I don't think I've got anything to add unless you want me to speak to the item.
Are there any questions about this?
John?
Go ahead, and then Jim.
I'd say just a comment, seeing that these plans are really on two sides of BH Electronics and my association with that company. I plan to abstain from future voting on any other activity on this project. So.
And Jim?
And my question goes to city staff and Sharon is where are we, with the wages and needs, where are we at our assessment talk? We're now into the middle of May, and I'm just curious of where we're at.
There's one outstanding financial issue that's being reviewed by the engineering department. There's a recommended change regarding payment of driveway replacements. And so we're looking at the economic impact that will have. That's the last outstanding issue. Once that issue is addressed, then we will be in a position to bring.
So we're getting very close on that. And I appreciate all the hard work put into that, too. But I'll still keep pushing it, so.
Very good. Any other questions? If not, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by David, seconded by Craig. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Then the motion passes. Agenda item number 15. Agenda item number 15, the preliminary plat of the unique addition. The action here would be the introduction of the preliminary plat and calling for a public hearing, and that public hearing would be held at the next regular council meeting, I believe. Jason, anything to add?
No, I don't think so.
We've
reached out to all utilities, I would say that, and we have worked with partners who need to review the plat, and we've done our due diligence.
I make a motion to call for the public hearing.
Second.
Motion by John, seconded by Craig to introduce the preliminary plat and call for a public hearing on that plat. Discussion?
So for this, I think a public hearing is great. I would just ask everybody who's listening on TV, public hearings are important. We have, as a council, to make our decisions based a lot upon our knowledge, but we're representatives for the public. So with tax increment financing and the implications thereof, it's kind of important to have public hearing in a public hearing. So I would ask that if you're concerned about it, come and talk to us. This is a perfect opportunity.
Other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 16. Agenda item number 16, Commission Board Liaison Reports. For my part, the Relief Association has not met since we last met. Regional Development Commission does meet this Thursday. Craig?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Southwest Amateur Sports Commission has kind of changed our focus a little bit. We've broken down into two different groups. I'm on the governance committee, so we're meeting, working on kind of some of the longer range things and potential expenditures, and I guess for lack of a better term, a business plan. So we're actually looking at some of the priorities, and we've discussed some of them before, like a multiple use floor that goes over the ice, you know, and giving us other opportunities for better use. And of course, those conversations involve a number of entities: MAHA, the soccer group, the college, the high school, some other potential things that could happen there. So one of the things that we're going to do is we're requesting to meet with some of the city officials, some of our department heads, to actually sit down and go through what some of the options are, and then to make sure that we're looking at priorities that would be consistent with the other priorities within the community, and also looking at what's the best way to approach that to minimize the any public or like city investment, but also to get good return back for the community and for the facility. So we'll be doing some meetings with Sharon and others to kind of put this thing together, and then of course all those issues will come before council. But we're trying to kind of, now that the things are in place out there and going, we're trying to stay valid and kind of regrouping on what we do. The other side of it, they're looking more at marketing and putting heads in beds and how to keep that facility active and serving the intent of the community. But just some of the reports that we're getting back on the benefits of the events and the feedback from the event participants is good. Like this weekend, there's going to be a craft show out there, and they're out of space. They've got over 130 entrants there, so they're using all the available floor space plus all of the second level stuff. So it's full. And to be honest with you, it'd be nice to have that floor right now, because I think we would start putting things over in the Lockwood rink. There's that much demand, and that's an awesome problem to have first year out. So we're optimistic. Things are moving forward, but we still want to, this needs to be done with a plan and a purpose. So I was really happy to see that we're moving that way. And there's some other activities coming. I don't have a merit board meeting yet until later this month, but there's a lot of activity there. We've had some side meetings with Jasmine and myself and Rob and others about trying to keep that direction moving, but a lot of things are happening there too. So we're hoping that that's all really positive. It's been a lot busier, so I think that's good news. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Steve?
I have not met.
Glenn?
Planning Commission meets tomorrow, and then Housing Commission meets on Monday.
John?
Just a couple of EDA items. There is a Discover Southwest Minnesota meeting tomorrow at 1 o'clock. If somebody's interested in attending that, that's basically EDA members from around the area. And then we're also potentially having a special meeting on the 23rd for if everything proceeds the way it's been going, to conduct the public hearing to sell the Parkway 2 lots.
Good. David?
Airport Commission met May 1st, and the one thing passed along was kudos from Lee Sorum, who is a pilot for Swan and Midwest Aviation, a former and now returning member of the Airport Commission, made a particular point of praising the expeditious snow removal off the runways during our 2 massive snowstorms in April, that we have the capacity to respond on very short notice to special needs for runway maintenance, and he wanted that to be shared.
Very good. Thank you, David. Jim?
Mine did not meet.
Thank you. We'll move then to agenda item number 17, councilmember individual items. Jim, let's start with you.
The first one I have is one of my more vocal constituents, who happens to be my son, keeps bringing up about East College Drive. And I know I contacted Jason. Thank you, Jason, it got taken care of. But the holes have grown again greatly.
I contacted MnDOT again this afternoon, and they were going to be on the case. And the bituminous patch should come early next week, but D&G would be filling the holes today or tomorrow. So.
And I appreciate that, because he has access to my bedroom and wakes me up when he comes home from work.
Happy to help.
And that's at the expense of the utility company?
At the expense of CenturyLink, the utility responsible for the patching in the holes.
And then the other one I have, and this is when I visited Craig Schaefer, and 13 days ago, about 2 weeks ago, there was a fairly severe fire up in northern Minnesota where they had to evacuate a whole city. And you're all familiar with the evacuation of Superior, Wisconsin. My daughter happened to get evacuated because she lives in Superior, Wisconsin. So I called Craig Schaefer, and I just kind of said, so if that happens in Marshall, what is the plan? Because as a city council member, because she asked me, and I was like, I don't know, which is an incorrect response. So Craig and I had visited about that, and I think, Sharon, you sent us some information, and I think it'd be good for us, and I apologize if I created work for the council members, but I think it would be good because you look at that evacuating of Marshall's only 13,000, but this time they orderly removed 27,000 people out of that city in a short period of time. They do have experience up there because they also did that in 1992. So they've actually done it twice in that city. I believe it didn't go as smooth in 92, but it's something that I think we as a council should, know what to do, which is mostly get out of the way, which is fine.
Right, yep.
So I think, Sharon, not sure if every council member has the current copy of the emergency manual. But
I know I do not.
If not, we should be sure everybody has that. In fact, that emergency board is meeting, Craig, we're meeting this month.
Yeah,
again,
and I was just popping on here to look at it. And I think, yeah,
so you're looking for that. Then one other point is I think Tessa sent out an email about the NIMS and really the procedural training that actually is required that all elected officials receive. So that's a notification that people would need to have at least 3 of those levels. And those levels don't go in order. It's like level, help me, Craig, it's like 700,
700, 800, and then probably 100, I think, are the ones that, and all of those can be done online. Just as a kind of a point on that, I have all of them, and I took the 100 internally with the agency, but our individual learning program didn't record it. So after I got that request, I went online and took it on. Granted, I can teach that class, but it's a 3-hour thing, and I got through it in 40 minutes.
And some of you may have, I had required to take it as part of my work also, and some of you that have been on the council for a while probably have taken it. Some years ago, Rob made a big point of, informing the council, but that needs to happen again. So
the OP meeting is on the 17th. The emergency operations plan meeting is on the 17th in the afternoon. Yep.
And that's so I apologize for creating work, but I think it'd be good for us to be prepared. I know the first time they evacuated Superior is because of the train derailment. Mm-hmm. And that can happen. And I'm not trying to scare people. I don't believe it will happen, but it can happen. Right? So,
Mr. Mayor, if I could add into that, and Jim, it's not a scare tactic. I think that's an absolute reality, and the railroad takes it serious. The community has had training. Obviously, there's priorities about staff time and who should go, who needs to go. One of the things that I've talked to Rob and to Sharon about, and I think one of the things that we should seriously look at is we could do a tabletop exercise that walks us through that slowly at our pace so that it's a learning piece, but it actually shows what all the moving parts are, and we can do that, and I think it would be good for us to do that, and it's also a way for us to train and also flush out our emergency operations plan, shows gaps, and you do that more frequently than you update the plan simply because people change out and stuff. So we could do that in a few hours, but again, it's another few hours of everybody's time. But it's a good investment.
We as a council?
As a city. All the city department heads. The council should sit through that, but take the NIMS first because it shows you how those pieces play. And it'll give you a kind of a peek behind the curtain. It's a comfort level, but if you can get the first hour or two of an emergency to be less frightful and, how should I say, foreign, everything goes smoother because it's those first couple hours that are frantic panic, and those are really critical to everybody's safety and for us to get off on a good start. So I think it's really smart for us to do that.
But and I think the point that I was making, you and I have chatted about this, is unfortunately for that part of the state, they did this in '92 and it was a mess. It was an absolute disaster.
Terrible, yeah.
So it was much smoother this time, but we'd rather, if it happens, our first time it's smooth and our citizens are safe.
Duluth and Superior, the U.S. Coast Guard, Harbor Point in Duluth, the Duluth Fire Department, the critical contractors and the critical players, including those oil providers, did an exercise last October in Duluth for a scenario not dissimilar to that incident. And part of it was the environmental protections, but the other part was the life safety. That was a full-blown exercise that involved 3 days and hundreds of people, okay? But it was some of the entities like Murphy Oil that had to do that to demonstrate it. That's the value of doing those. That's like in the crawl, walk, run scenario, that's like run. We're talking about doing a crawl here, but I think it would be really effective.
And the value to doing those is after this fire up there, everybody went home.
Yeah.
They had no loss of life through that process. So that's all I have.
Good point.
David?
First, a question, I guess, for Sharon. One of our April snowstorms severely compressed the visit of the delegation from the Minnesota Vikings. Unfortunately, there's an available makeup date on May 19th for a number of community events. I just wanted to confirm my understanding from other staff that they've got a sufficient venue or location for their downtown events on the grounds of one of our major employers that will not involve closing a road. Do I have that right?
That is correct. We did some preliminary research into other areas so it wouldn't be disruptive to our streets.
Okay. As I understand, their initial proposal for the reschedule would have involved closing downtown, and I had a little bit of a problem. I'll sound a little like Glenn here for a minute, for expecting our local small businesses to either shut down or significantly lose customers on a big retail day to benefit a $1 billion corporation. And they're here to do goodwill, so I'm not whacking them much. But I just wanted to be sure that was correct understanding.
That's correct.
Thank you very much for that. Now, brace yourselves. I have 7 items, all of them informational. Let's see. Yes, well, we've done one already. Good. On April 25th, just hang on, Craig. It'll get fun. April 25th, I went to St. Paul with Brad Rose. We were invited by Senator Dames to testify before the Senate Bonding Committee about his bill to issue state bonds for $167 million for both water treatment and wastewater treatment programs, which was very well received by the committee, but they have to, of course, get through the full Senate, the House, and the governor. But it was an honor to do that and fun to be part of the process. On April 28th, I had also the honor, in lieu of the mayor, who was away, to welcome the Big Sing competition, which is a gathering of, about 18 or 20 male corps from the upper Midwest. It was hosted here last in 2002. And each of the cities takes turn hosting it, so it's quite a big deal for it to be here. And those mature fellows could still belt it out pretty well. So it was an impressive program. And then on May 1st, I had the opportunity to represent the city when Senator Amy Klobuchar was here at the Chamber of Commerce at a roundtable discussing our chronic shortage of daycare providers in the region, and a lot of good ideas discussed there, and good opportunity for as always, whenever we get a statewide official to come to Marshall to showcase a bit of what we're up to here. That same day, in fact, it was announced just before the senator got there, the Corridors of Commerce Awards, significant unhappiness across greater Minnesota because of the, I'll say, the non-distribution, clearly violating the spirit and probably if not quite the letter of the program as it's been in place for 5 years of a distribution between Metro and greater Minnesota. And, if you define greater Minnesota, you use the Rhode Island standard, anything within 35 miles of your biggest downtown. Well, greater Rhode Island is one thing, but obviously there's a problem, and I think MnDOT did its job, honestly and transparently. The point process, as screwed up by the legislature last year, they were all concerned, well, are we going to get all our projects in greater Minnesota? We better put in some criteria. Well, the too many cooks foul the broth. In this case, too many cooks, I think, put MnDOT, I'll say it this way, out of sympathy to them, in an impossible situation. The point total pretty well dictated those 4 mega projects and it really effectively all of them in the Metro. And I think that's directly traceable to the intervention of the legislature for good intent, but not really perhaps well thought with the criteria they added last year. As it happens, I'm going to St. Paul tomorrow wearing my Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities hat for their event with legislators, and that will be a topic of discussion and some consideration of how we can fix that, perhaps for future Corridors of Commerce awards. And that may, if Craig is lucky, that may be it. I believe that's all, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David.
Time left.
Yeah.
I yield the balance of my time.
So, John, anything?
Just one item that coming up on May 15th, Tuesday evening, is the closest of the Governor's Task Force regional housing forums. That'll be held in Sleepy Eye. At this point, I know Tara and I are planning on attending. Anyone else that's interested, it's a good opportunity to both listen and talk about items related to housing in the greater Minnesota area and primarily in the southwestern part of the state. So that's, again, May 15th. Starts at 5 o'clock at night in Sleepy Eye.
Okay, thank you, John. Craig?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be real brief. I just want to give a call-out thanks to the Public Works Department. I know after those last couple of snowstorms and things had thawed out, most of our alleys really caught it. And they've been really busy out fixing, patching, grading where they're gravel, and I know that it's really appreciated. We caught a lot of heck about it. The alleys caught a lot of heck, and it's kind of like no good deed goes unpunished moving that snow. But I just want to say that again, nice job, and thanks for how hard everybody works. I think that shows good leadership, and it just shows good staff that are pretty dedicated to what's happening there, and I really appreciate it. I know the residents that I talk to do also, so thank you.
Nothing, Your Honor.
I have nothing.
Just two quick things. Since we last met, the Minnesota Parks and Trails Council did have a celebration of the 10-year anniversary of the Legacy Amendment that was held at the Red Baron Arena. It was quite well attended. A couple of the leaders on the Parks and Trails Council, including one who had been employed a number of years ago as our Park and Rec Director, Bob Bierscheid. He is the chair of the Parks and Trails Council. He was part of it, and he was able to ride along with us on the Camden Trail, which was funded to a large part through the Legacy Grant. And of course, it was good for them to actually see the results of how great it turned out. And they see it on paper, but they were able to actually experience it. So, and then finally, I'd mentioned I was able to once again represent the community at the SMSU graduation. Of course, a couple of our faculty were there, and Glenn was the led all the faculty in. He's the first one. So, but it did underscore for me what an asset we have. There's roughly 500 graduates, and what an important part and what a valuable part and what really a blessing it is for Marshall and the Southwest Minnesota to have a higher education institution that's here. So sometimes we perhaps take it for granted. It's been here 50 years. But we want to be sure that we do whatever we can do to have it remain strong. Higher education funding right now is challenged, not only in Minnesota but all over the country. And that's one of those things, I think, whether you call it economic development or whether you call it quality of life or importance for viability in the future, we all need to pay attention to what we need so that SMSU can be strong in the community for the next 50 years. With that, we'll move on then to agenda item number 18.
Mr. Mayor and Councilmen, just a couple calendar items for May. On May 22nd, we scheduled a tour of the county jail, and this was really set up for a couple reasons. One is obviously we have joint use of the facility with our law enforcement, and also we have planned a presentation by our Drug Task Force Commander, Jody Gladys, on just some of the work that he's been doing, and I think it'll also highlight an area where the city and the county collaborate and work together. We heard a presentation, obviously, by the library director tonight, another good example of the city-county partnership, and a lot of areas where we work well together. Even though the headlines don't always seem like we do, we actually do work well together. And the other calendar item I want to mention is we did some phone calls last Friday regarding a special meeting on May 29th at 5:30 to open bids for the Saratoga Street project. This was due to being certain about a publication requirement. We don't believe we have all members present, but after a polling session over the phone, we believe we have a quorum, and this keeps the schedule of Saratoga relatively in place, which is really important for our summer construction schedule. And then finally, I did put this in an email in my administrator update, but I would like to have Loic Da come to before the council here and just introduce himself. He will be an intern with the city this summer, and a couple things with that's really positive. He has interest in government, which is important for our future. And secondly, he is an unpaid intern. So we hope to put him to good work. So, Loic, if you just want to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Councilman. Like she said, my name is Loic Da, and I'm a student at SMSU. I'm majoring in political science. I'm a senior, and my interests are government, politics, and especially advocacy and public administration. So I like Marshall. I've been here for the past 3 years, and I enjoy being in this small community, and so I can focus more on studying and doing what I need to do to be successful. And I look forward to this opportunity to work for the city, and I enjoy all of these things. Thank you.
Welcome.
Well, welcome, and it's our, whenever we have an intern, it's really our staff's responsibility, our council's responsibility to be sure that it's a good learning experience for you, and I think our staff, and as well as the council, will learn also from the experience. So thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I had, Mr. Mayor.
Jason.
I would just mention that you probably noticed RNG Construction has started work in the South Bend and Marguerite neighborhoods. They'll start the underground work this week. I think that's all I've got to update.
Any questions for Jason? Dennis?
Nothing else, Your Honor.
We'll move then to agenda item number 21. The pending agenda items. Any questions about those? Agenda item number 22 is the information items, including the building permits. Notice we have a sizable one, $1.5 million. Agenda item number 23 is the upcoming meetings, which brings us to agenda item number 24, to consider adjourning this meeting.
So move.
Motion by Craig, is there a second? Seconded by David. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. We're adjourned.